The night started like any other. I didn't want to be at the movie theater. I didn't want to be babysitting my 8-year-old brother Dylan and his equally hyperactive best friend Lucas. But my parents had plans, and I didn't. So here I was. "Just take them to the movies, Mia," Mom had said while fastening her earrings. "It's one night." I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. It wasn't worth it. Regal Grand Cinemas was packed. Friday night, the rush hour of entertainment. Teenagers posing for selfies, kids running in circles, couples holding hands like this was the most romantic place on earth. I guided Dylan and Lucas through the chaos, keeping a firm grip on their shoulders. "I want to see the arcade," Dylan whined. "Movie first," I said. "Arcade later." Lucas groaned. "But the movie doesn't start for 10 minutes. I sighed. "Then let's get snacks." That satisfied them for now. The concession line was long, winding past the glowing display cases of popcorn and candy. I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly while we waited. "I want a blue slushie," Dylan said. Lucas nodded. "Me too." "Fine." I glanced up to see how far we had to go. "Just don't wander off." But they already had. I turned quickly, scanning the area. They stood a few feet away, eyes glued to a giant cardboard cutout of some superhero movie. I exhaled. "Stay where I can see you." They barely acknowledged me. By the time it was my turn, I ordered their drinks, got my popcorn, and turned back around. Lucas was gone. Dylan stood there alone, still sipping his slushie. My stomach dropped. "Where's Lucas?" Dylan barely looked up. "He went with that guy." My throat went dry. "What guy?" "The one who said he had the new game," Dylan said, licking his straw. "What game?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "The new Planet Zero game," Dylan said. "Lucas really wanted it, so he went to see." I ran. The hallway leading to the theaters was dimly lit, carpeted in that weird pattern all movie theaters had. At the far end, an exit door was closing. I shoved through it and burst outside. The back lot was mostly empty except for a few cars near the fence, and there, about 20 feet away, was a man. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie with one hand on a car door, the other on Lucas's shoulder. Lucas looked back at me, confused. I screamed his name. The man flinched. Then, in a split second, he shoved Lucas to the ground, jumped into his car, and sped off, tires screeching. I ran to Lucas, shaking all over, my breath coming in gasps. "Are you okay?" I grabbed his arms, checking him over. Lucas sat up, dazed. "Why did he push me?" I swallowed hard. "He was trying to take you." Lucas blinked like he didn't fully understand. I gripped his wrist. "Come on, we're going inside." The next 20 minutes were a blur. I told an employee what happened. The manager called the police. People gathered in the lobby, whispering. Dylan stood off to the side, still slurping his slushie, while Lucas sat on a bench, shaken. I couldn't stop shaking. An officer arrived within 10 minutes, taking my statement. "Did you get a license plate?" the cop asked. I swallowed hard. Number had happened too fast. Lucas finally spoke up. I thought he was just being nice. The cop crouched in front of him. "Did you know the man?" Lucas shook his head. "Number." "But he said he saw me playing Planet Zero on my Switch last week. He said he had the new one in his car and I could have it." A sick feeling curled in my stomach. The officer frowned. "Where was this?" Lucas hesitated. "Here, last time we came." I froze. This wasn't random. That man had been here before. Watching. Waiting. We were allowed to leave after an hour. The cops said they'd review security footage, but I knew the truth. That man was long gone. As I drove the boys home, the weight of what happened finally hit me. If I had taken even 1 minute longer, Lucas would have been gone. Gone. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. When we got to my house, I pulled Dylan aside. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" He looked guilty. "I don't know. I thought Lucas was coming back." I exhaled sharply. He was just a kid. He didn't understand. But I did. That man had been watching him for weeks, and he'd almost gotten away with it. I didn't sleep that night. And I never went back to that theater again. The nightmares started that night. I kept seeing Lucas being dragged into that car, kept seeing the man's hands on his shoulders, kept seeing the exit door closing as I ran down the hallway. Too slow, too late. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I checked my phone. 4:12 a.m. I wanted to call Lucas's mom, just to make sure he was home, but I knew that would only make things worse. So I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that man was still out there somewhere. The next day at school, I felt like a zombie. Dylan and Lucas, on the other hand, acted like nothing had happened. At lunch, I heard Lucas bragging about it to his friends. He tried to grab me, but I fought him off, Lucas said, puffing out his chest. Mia had to run after me, but I had it under control. I clenched my jaw. Under control? He had no idea. After school, I pulled him aside. Lucas, this isn't a joke. He shrugged. I know. Do you? I asked. Because you almost got kidnapped. Lucas hesitated. Yeah, but he didn't take me. I exhaled, trying to keep my voice even. Because I stopped him. If I wasn't there, what do you think would have happened? His smile faltered. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Just be careful, I muttered, rubbing my arms. That guy, he might still be watching. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? There was no reply, just breathing. A slow, quiet inhale, then an exhale. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting. It was him. I just knew it. The next few days were uneasy. I kept checking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, looking at every car parked too long outside my house. I told my parents everything. Dad tightened the security system. Mom started picking Dylan up from school instead of letting him take the bus. But the worst part? Nobody ever found the guy. The security footage at the theater was too grainy to make out his face. The cops had no leads. And then, just like that, everyone moved on. But I couldn't, because deep down I felt it. This wasn't over. A week later, I was home alone. Dylan was at a friend's house. My parents were out for dinner. It was just me, curled up on the couch, trying to focus on a movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, a knock at the door. My breath hitched. I checked my phone. No texts from my parents. Another knock. Louder. Slowly, I crept to the peephole and looked outside. A man stood on the porch, tall, wearing a hoodie. I stepped back, heart slamming in my chest. He knocked again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, he turned and walked away. I stayed frozen, waiting for the sound of a car starting. But it never came. I checked the peephole again. The porch was empty, but I knew. He was still out there, watching, waiting. The old movie theater stood at the edge of town, tucked between a laundromat and a closed-down diner. It had been around for decades, long before the big multiplexes took over. The floors were sticky, the seats were torn in places, and the projectors had a habit of flickering at just the wrong moment. But people still came, drawn in by the cheap tickets and nostalgia. For Harper, the job was just that. A job. It was her last summer before college, and she needed the extra cash. Most nights she worked concession, pouring sodas and serving buckets of butter-drenched popcorn. But on weekends, she was stuck with closing shifts, which meant cleaning up after the last movie and making sure everything was locked up. Tonight was one of those nights. Almost done? Robbie asked as he leaned against the counter. He was one of the few co-workers Harper actually liked. Tall, lanky, and always cracking stupid jokes to keep the long shifts from dragging. Almost, she said, wiping down the popcorn machine. I just need to check the last auditorium. Robbie groaned. You always get stuck with that part. I know, she sighed. But at least it's empty. Shouldn't take long. The last movie had ended over an hour ago, and the theater was mostly silent now, except for the hum of the projectors shutting down and the occasional rattle of the air vents. Harper grabbed her broom and headed toward Auditorium 6. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The theater was dark except for the dim glow of the exit signs. The stale scent of popcorn lingered in the air, mixing with something else, something musty, almost like damp fabric. Harper ignored it and stepped inside. She started sweeping, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. It was quiet, too quiet. Then she heard it, a laugh. She froze, her grip tightening on the broom handle. It had been faint, almost distant, like someone chuckling under their breath. Harper turned toward the sound, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The theater was supposed to be empty. She had watched the last customers leave herself. Hello? She called out. Silence. Probably just her imagination. Shaking off the unease, she went back to sweeping. But then, the laugh again. Louder this time. Harper whipped around. At the very back row, in the farthest seat, sat a man. She hadn't seen him come in. She hadn't heard the door open. He was sitting perfectly still, his posture rigid. The dim red glow of the exit sign barely lit his face, but she could make out a grin, wide, unsettling. His shoulders shook slightly as if he was trying to hold in more laughter. Harper's stomach tightened. Sir? She forced out. The theater is closed. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, grinning. Then in a slow, almost exaggerated motion, he raised his hand and pointed at her. Harper's breath hitched. Her heart pounded as she took a shaky step back. I'm sorry, but you need to leave, she said, her voice less steady than she wanted it to be. The man didn't answer. Then, the lights flickered. For a split second, the theater was completely dark. When the emergency lighting buzzed back to life, the seat was empty. Harper felt cold all over. She scanned the room, but the man was gone. The only exit was the one she had just walked through. There was no way he could have left without her seeing him. A chill ran down her spine. Something wasn't right. She gripped her broom tighter and forced herself to move toward the exit. She needed to find Robbie. Robbie, she called as she stepped back into the hallway. Silence. The lobby was empty. She checked behind the concession stand, the break room, even the tiny office near the back. Nothing. Then, a noise. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway behind her. Harper turned, her pulse hammering. A shadow moved at the far end of the corridor. Not Robbie. Too tall, too still, just standing there, watching. Harper took a step back. The shadow twitched. Then, it lunged. Harper bolted. She ran blindly, her sneakers skidding against the polished floor. She turned a corner, nearly colliding with a stack of popcorn buckets. Where was Robbie? Where was anyone? She reached the emergency exit and shoved against it. Nothing. It didn't budge. Panic clawed at her chest. Something was wrong. She turned, her back pressed against the door. The hallway stretched before her, empty now. But she knew he was there. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. And then, the laugh. Right behind her. She barely had time to scream. The next thing Harper knew, she was on the floor. Her head throbbed, her vision swimming. The hallway was empty. Had she fallen? Someone had grabbed her. She remembered the rough grip on her wrist, the sharp pull. But now, nothing. Harper scrambled to her feet. She needed to get out. She staggered toward the lobby, her breath ragged. And then she saw him, standing at the concession stand. Still, watching. But this time, he wasn't alone. Robbie was there, but he wasn't moving. Harper's stomach dropped. The man turned his head slightly, locking eyes with her. Then, without a sound, he stepped backward and vanished, right into the shadows. Harper rushed to Robbie, shaking him. "Hey, wake up." He groaned, blinking groggily. "What happened?" "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to go, now." Together they stumbled toward the front doors. They burst outside into the cool night air. The street was empty, the theater behind them dark and silent. Harper turned, heart hammering. The windows reflected only darkness. No movement. No sign of him. But she knew. He was still there, waiting. And next time, she might not make it out. Harper quit the next day. She never stepped foot in that theater again. And late at night, when she thought about it, she could still hear the laughter. The road stretched ahead, a seemingly endless ribbon of asphalt illuminated only by the soft glow of our headlights. The hum of the tires against the pavement blended with the faint music playing from the car's speakers. Emily tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, her gaze fixed ahead, while I, Mallory, reclined in the passenger seat scrolling through my phone. Our road trip wasn't anything extravagant, just a break from routine, an excuse to leave behind our jobs, responsibilities, and the monotony of daily life for a few days. We'd been best friends since high school, the kind of friendship that didn't require constant upkeep. We could go months without seeing each other and still fall right back into step as if no time had passed. The plan was simple: drive a few states away, explore some new places, and just enjoy the open road. No strict itinerary, no reservations, just spontaneity. But after a full day of driving, exhaustion had begun to set in. Emily stifled a yawn. "We should find a place to crash for the night." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm getting stiff from sitting so long. Let's look for a hotel." A quick search on my phone led us to a reasonably priced hotel about 20 miles ahead, just off the highway. It wasn't fancy, but it had solid reviews. That was good enough for us. When we pulled into the parking lot, the area was exactly what you'd expect from an off-the-highway stop. A gas station, a few chain restaurants, a strip mall that looked half abandoned, and, sitting just at the edge of the lot, a movie theater. As we checked in, the hotel lobby was dimly lit, the receptionist barely looking up from her computer as she handed us our key. Once we got to our room, we should have been tired, but hours of sitting in the car had left us restless. Emily glanced out the window toward the theater's glowing marquee. "Hey, why don't we check out a movie?" I followed her gaze. A midnight movie sounds kind of perfect. We grabbed our wallets and headed out into the cool night air. The theater stood at the edge of the lot, its neon sign flickering slightly. As we got closer, something felt off. The parking lot had cars, but far fewer than you'd expect for a Friday night. Still, we shrugged it off. Maybe it was just a slow night. We stepped inside, and that's when the unease settled in. The lobby was exactly what you'd expect. A large concession stand, movie posters lining the walls, the scent of popcorn lingering in the air. Everything was as it should be, except for one glaring detail. There was no one there. Not a single other patron, not a single employee. Emily and I exchanged glances. "Where is everyone?" she murmured. I had no answer. We hesitated before stepping farther inside. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. The concession stand was fully stocked, the popcorn machine filled with fresh popcorn, but no one was there. The cash registers sat idle, untouched. "This is weird," Emily muttered. I swallowed hard, feeling a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. "Maybe they're in the back," I suggested, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. Emily hesitated before nodding. "Let's check the theaters. Maybe people are already inside watching movies." We moved toward the hallway leading to the screening rooms. The carpet muffled our footsteps, making the silence even more unnerving. Emily reached for the nearest theater door and pushed it open. Darkness, not the dim ambient glow of a paused movie, just pitch black. Goosebumps erupted along my arms. Emily let the door swing shut. Okay, that's creepy. We tried another. Same thing. No screen glow, no sound, just a gaping void. The unease in my stomach grew heavier. This isn't right, I whispered. We reached the end of the hallway where an emergency exit door led outside. By now, neither of us wanted to walk back through the empty lobby. Without speaking, we pushed through the exit, stepping into the night air. I exhaled in relief. But then Emily grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Mallory," she whispered. "Look." I followed her gaze back toward the theater. My stomach dropped. The entire building was now completely dark. Every light, every sign, gone. We hurried to the front, pressing against the glass doors. The lobby, which had been brightly lit just minutes ago, now looked abandoned. Dust coated the floor. The posters were faded and peeling. The concession stand was empty. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Emily yanked the door handle. Locked. Panic clawed at my throat. "How?" she whispered. "We were just in there." I shook my head, my mind racing. Had we imagined it? Number. We had walked through that lobby. We had smelled the popcorn. We had seen the posters. So why did it now look like it had been deserted for years? Neither of us spoke. We just turned and hurried back to the hotel, locking the door behind us. We put on the TV, trying to distract ourselves, but I don't think either of us actually watched it. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the hotel walls, every distant car passing by, every faint sound set my nerves on edge. Morning came too slowly. As we checked out, Emily and I hesitated before getting in the car. Without really discussing it, we both knew we had to drive by the theater one last time. We pulled into the parking lot, and my stomach twisted at what I saw. The building looked abandoned, not just closed, abandoned. The windows were coated in grime, the doors shut tight, the marquee, which had been displaying movie titles just hours ago, was now completely blank. Emily pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she searched for the theater online. Her face paled as she read aloud. "It says it's been permanently closed for months." Silence. I turned back to the theater, my mind screaming for a logical explanation. How had we gotten inside? And more importantly, who or what had let us in? We didn't stick around to find out. Emily put the car in drive, and we left that parking lot behind, neither of us speaking until we were miles away. Even now, years later, I still can't explain what happened that night. All I know is that I never want to go back. It was supposed to be just another normal night out. A simple, laid-back movie date with my girlfriend. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing even remotely exciting. Just the kind of quiet night we both needed. The plan was simple. Pick a movie, grab some snacks, and enjoy a couple of hours in the comfort of a dark theater, escaping reality for a little while. The theater wasn't too packed when we arrived, which I liked. It was late enough that most of the big crowds had already come and gone. The last few showings of the night always had this peaceful atmosphere, just scattered groups of people, minding their own business, settling in for the final screenings. We found our seats easily, near the middle of the auditorium. The previews started rolling, a mix of upcoming blockbusters and indie films. I wasn't paying much attention. I was comfortable, the room was dimly lit, and I was already halfway sinking into that pre-movie relaxation. Then my girlfriend Emma leaned in and whispered, "I'm kind of hungry." I turned to her and smirked. "Didn't we just eat before we got here?" She shrugged, giving me that playful, innocent look she always did when she wanted something. I didn't think I'd be hungry, but now I am. I sighed, but it wasn't like I actually minded. "All right, I'll go grab something. You stay here." "Are you sure?" she asked. Yeah, I'll be fast." I got up, stretched slightly, and made my way down the aisle toward the exit. The second I stepped out of the theater and into the lobby, the contrast hit me. Bright lights, low, distant murmurs of conversation, the occasional beep of a register, the scent of buttered popcorn and something fried. There were a few other people in the lobby, some in line for food, others just hanging around, waiting for their movies to start. I took my place at the back of the concession stand line, shifting my weight from foot to foot, glancing at the menu overhead even though I already knew the basic selection. That was when I heard my name. "Hey, Jake?" I turned automatically, caught off guard. The guy standing in front of me was smiling like he knew me. I blinked, trying to place him. Nothing. He looked about my age, maybe a little rougher around the edges. Something about him was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Before I could even ask, he spoke again. "You don't remember me, huh?" I hesitated. Should I?" He laughed lightly. "Brandon, man. You remember Brandon, right?" That name made me pause. Brandon. Yeah, I remembered him. We'd been pretty good friends in high school, played football together, ran in the same circles. But after graduation, we drifted apart. He went one way, I went another. It had been a couple of years since I last saw him. Hearing his name made me relax a little. If this guy knew Brandon, maybe I did know him at some point. Maybe I had just forgotten. "He's here," the guy said, grinning. "Come on, he'd love to see you. Just around the corner." I hesitated again. I still needed to grab food for Emma. But catching up with an old friend? That didn't sound so bad. "Yeah, all right," I said. "But I gotta be quick." "Won't take long," the guy promised. He turned and led the way. I followed. We moved away from the main area of the lobby, heading toward the quieter side of the theater, the hallway leading to some of the smaller screening rooms. It wasn't a part of the building I'd normally walk through, and as we went deeper in, the noise of the lobby faded behind us. Something about that silence made the hairs on my arms prickle. We took a turn, then another. The lighting in this part of the theater was dimmer, more subdued. Fewer people, fewer exits. I started to feel the first real sliver of unease slide into my gut. Then I saw them. At the far end of the hallway, near a single theater entrance, a small group of guys was standing together. 3, maybe 4 of them. All of them were wearing ski masks. That was the moment everything in me tensed. Even with their faces covered, I knew one thing immediately. None of them were Brandon. I stopped walking. My pulse spiked. My body went stiff. The guys in the masks all turned, not toward the guy who had led me here, but toward me. I swallowed hard. My instincts were screaming at me now. Something was wrong. The guy in front of me turned slightly, gesturing for me to keep moving. "Come on, man, they're just over here." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked away. Not fast, not panicked, just moving with purpose. I heard him call after me, his tone shifting slightly. "Yo, where you going?" I didn't answer. I walked straight back to the lobby, my heart hammering against my ribs. The second I was back in the bright, crowded space, I felt safer, but I still didn't stop. I got right back in line at the concession stand like nothing had happened. A few minutes later, I felt eyes on me. I glanced over, and sure enough, the same guy had reappeared at the edge of the hallway. He was peeking around the corner, scanning the crowd. His eyes landed on me. For a second, we locked gazes. Then, just as quickly, he disappeared back around the corner. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I grabbed the food, made my way back to my theater, and slid into my seat beside Emma just as the movie was starting. I didn't tell her. Not yet. I wanted to believe that it was over, that I had dodged whatever was about to happen back there. But then toward the end of the movie, something made me look toward the entrance, and I saw them again. 2 of them, standing just inside the doorway, wearing ski masks, not watching the movie, watching me. The moment my eyes met theirs, they turned and walked out. My blood ran cold. I checked the entrance several more times before the movie ended, but I didn't see them again. When the credits rolled, I finally turned to Emma and told her everything. She listened, wide-eyed, and when we left, I was hyper-aware of my surroundings. I scanned the lobby, the parking lot, everywhere. But they were gone. That night I called Brandon. He had no idea what I was talking about, but when I described the guy who approached me, he hesitated. "Yeah, I think I know who that is," he said slowly. "Who?" I pressed. Brandon was quiet for a long moment, then he just said, "Stay away from him." And that was it. I don't know what those guys wanted that night, but I know one thing for sure. I walked away, and I am damn glad I did. I've always loved movies. There's something about sitting in a dark theater, the hum of anticipation in the air, the flicker of light on the screen. It's comforting. Ever since I was a kid, the theater felt like a second home, a place where I could disappear into someone else's world for a little while. Even as an adult, that never changed. A couple of years ago, I lived just a few blocks from a small, independently owned theater called Ridgeview Cinema. It wasn't a big chain, but it had charm. The kind of place with a neon sign that buzzed softly at night, where the scent of fresh popcorn lingered in the air long after the last show. It was never too crowded, and best of all, I could walk there whenever I wanted. Most of the time, I went with friends, but sometimes if no one was free, I'd go alone. That night was one of those times. A movie I'd been dying to see was playing, and since I had nothing else to do, I figured, why not? I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside. The walk was peaceful, the streets mostly empty, just the occasional car passing by. It was late, but not too late. The air was crisp, carrying the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the block. By the time I reached Ridgeview Cinema, it was almost deserted. The box office was empty except for a bored-looking teenager scrolling on his phone. I bought my ticket, grabbed a small popcorn and soda, and headed inside. The auditorium was nearly vacant. A couple near the back, a guy a few rows ahead of me, and a lone man off to the side. That was it. Perfect. I picked a seat in the middle, not too close, not too far, and settled in. The previews rolled, the lights dimmed, and for the next 2 hours, I lost myself in the film. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. The credits started rolling, and the soft glow of the theater lights returned. I stretched, letting out a small breath. It had been a good movie. I gathered my things, ready to head out. Then I felt it. A presence, a shift in the air behind me. I turned slightly, just enough to glance over my shoulder. A man was standing directly behind my seat. Too close. I hadn't heard him approach. My heart gave a small, uneasy jump. He was tall, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and a scruffy beard. His clothes were wrinkled, mismatched, like he hadn't given much thought to them, and he smelled. A strong, stale scent of cigarettes and something else, something sour. He was smiling, a small, strange smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I watched you the whole time." My stomach dropped. I didn't react at first. I just stared, my mind scrambling to process what I'd just heard. Maybe I misheard him. Maybe he meant something else, but then he leaned in. "You were watching the movie," he murmured, "but I was watching you." A breathy chuckle left his lips, a slow, deliberate sound, like he was savoring my reaction. I felt a cold, creeping sensation crawl up my spine. I forced a stiff, uncomfortable smile and turned away. My pulse pounded in my ears. Ignore him. Just leave. I stood up, gripping my bag tightly, and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back, but I could feel him, watching me. I stepped into the dimly lit hallway, my breath coming quicker than before. He was just some creep messing with me. I repeated it in my head like a mantra. I wasn't in danger. I just had to get outside, go home, and forget about it, but then I stopped. He was there, standing near the entrance to the lobby. He wasn't looking directly at me, but he was close. Close enough that I'd have to pass him to leave. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to walk by him. Then I remembered. There was another way out. I'd been to this theater enough times to know that down a quieter hallway, past the restrooms, There was an emergency exit that led straight to the parking lot. Without hesitating, I turned and started walking in that direction. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. A shift. He had noticed me moving. I didn't wait to find out if he'd follow. I walked faster. The hallway was dimly lit, empty. The only sound was the distant hum of the theater's ventilation system. I reached the exit door, pushed it open, and stepped outside. The night air was cold against my skin. I was at the far end of the parking lot, near the sidewalk that led back to my apartment. I let out a slow breath. I was fine. Right? I shook off my nerves and started walking. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The streets were quiet. The occasional street lamp flickered. Then, I heard it. Footsteps, software distant, but unmistakable. My heart stuttered. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't want to be obvious. Instead, I kept walking, listening. The footsteps continued, and they were keeping pace with me. Finally, I stole a glance over my shoulder, and my stomach dropped. It was him, a good distance back, but there, following me. I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe he just happens to be going the same way, but my gut told me otherwise. I picked up my pace. So did he. I turned a corner. A minute later, I glanced back. He had turned too. At that point, I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to sprint to my apartment and lock the door, but I didn't want to let him know I was panicking. I walked. Fast. My apartment building came into view. Relief flooded me. Just a little farther. I reached the door, fumbled for my keys, and quickly let myself inside. The door shut behind me, locking automatically. I turned. He was still outside, standing on the sidewalk, staring at the entrance. A tremor ran through me. He can't get in. I was safe, right? I took the elevator up, walked into my apartment, locked the door, and finally let out a breath. For a few minutes, I just stood there trying to shake off the fear. Then, a knock. A sharp, deliberate knock. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I crept toward the door, peered through the peephole. Him. Somehow. He had gotten inside the building. I clamped a hand over my mouth. He tried the doorknob, locked. Then he took a step back and just stood there, waiting. My hands were shaking. I knew I had to do something. Summoning every ounce of courage, I cracked the door open. Just enough to speak. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." My voice was firm. His expression didn't change. Then, slowly, he grinned. And after what felt like an eternity, he turned, walked away. I watched through the peephole until he was gone. That night, I barely slept. I never saw him again. But his words, his smile, the way he stood outside my door, I still see them. And I never walk home alone at night anymore. The thing about working night shifts at a movie theater is that it's eerily quiet once the last show lets out. During peak hours, the lobby bustled with life, people ordering overpriced popcorn, teens loitering near the arcade machines, couples sneaking in outside snacks. But by 11:30 p.m., the place turned into a ghost town. The neon glow from the concession stand still hummed, the digital movie posters flickered, but the life was gone. Tonight was one of those slow, dead nights. It was just me and Ryan, the only other employee scheduled to close. Ryan was a lanky guy, a couple of years older than me, who mostly kept to himself. We weren't exactly friends, but we'd worked together enough times to have an easy routine. He handled the projectors, and I took care of final cleanup, wiping down counters, sweeping the auditoriums, making sure no one was still lurking around. Most nights I didn't mind. The quiet was nice, but sometimes when it was just the two of us, the silence pressed in too much. Tonight, that silence felt different, heavy, watching. I shook off the feeling and finished restocking the candy at the concession stand. The last movie, a 9:45 horror flick, had wrapped up over an hour ago, so all that was left was a final sweep of the theaters. Ryan had already shut down the projectors and left me to finish up. "I'll be in the break room," he'd said before disappearing behind the employee door. That left me alone. I grabbed a broom and trash bag and headed toward Auditorium 6, the last one on my list. The theater was dark except for the faint glow of the aisle lights. A few half-empty soda cups and crumpled popcorn bags littered the floor, but overall it wasn't bad. I walked to the front row and started sweeping up popcorn, the familiar sound of the bristles scraping against the carpet filling the stillness. Then I heard it. A door creaking open. I froze. The entrance to the auditorium was just out of sight behind a dividing wall. I expected to hear footsteps, a voice, anything, but there was nothing. I peeked over my shoulder. No one. Probably just Ryan grabbing something from the supply closet nearby. I exhaled, shook off the weird feeling, and kept sweeping. A few minutes passed, and just as I finished up, I heard it again, the door opening, closing. I whipped around, heart hammering. The entrance was empty. No movement, no sound. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I forced myself to move toward the exit, scanning the rows of seats one last time, just to be sure. I reached the dividing wall and stepped through the doorway. That's when I saw him. A man, standing just inside the entrance, blocking the exit. He was big, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes. His face was partly shadowed, but what I could see unsettled me. Something about the way he stood, too still, too deliberate, set off alarms in my brain. I forced my voice to stay calm. Can I help you?" The man's mouth curled into a slow, unnatural smile. "Yes," he said softly. "Come here." His arms spread open, like he wanted a hug. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I took a step back. "Sir, the theater's closed." He took a step forward. My breath caught. I turned to run back into the theater, but in 2 long strides he was on me. An arm wrapped around my chest, another hand clamped over my mouth. I tried to scream, but the sound came out muffled. His grip was tight, crushing, my back pressed against his chest. His breath was hot against my ear as he whispered, "Shh, don't make this difficult." I kicked, thrashed, bit his hand. He grunted but held on, dragging me toward the exit. I couldn't break free. He was too strong. I dug my nails into his arm, twisted, fought. Nothing worked. My lungs burned from panicked breathing. My mind was screaming, but the words wouldn't come out. Then, suddenly, footsteps. The door slammed open and Ryan's voice cut through the panic. "Hey, let her go!" For a second, the man hesitated. That's all I needed. I stomped on his foot, elbowed his ribs, and broke free. Ryan charged at him. The two crashed into the seats, struggling. I stumbled back, gasping for air, hands shaking as I yanked my phone out and dialed 911. The fight was brutal. Ryan landed a solid punch, but the man shoved him back hard, knocking him against the row of seats. Then, he bolted. By the time we ran outside, sirens were already in the distance. The man sprinted toward the side exit, but flashing red and blue lights flooded the parking lot. A group of officers jumped out, yelling for him to stop. He hesitated for half a second, then took off in the opposite direction. A cop tackled him. He hit the pavement hard, struggling, yelling something we couldn't hear. Another officer joined in, then another. Within moments, they had him handcuffed. Ryan and I stood frozen at the entrance, watching in disbelief. My legs felt weak. My whole body trembled. The adrenaline was wearing off and cold reality sank in. If Ryan hadn't come when he did... I swallowed, shaking that thought away. A cop approached, his expression serious. "Are you both okay?" Ryan nodded. I did too, though I wasn't sure if it was true. The officer's gaze flicked toward the handcuffed man. "We've been looking for him." Something in his voice sent a chill through me. Ryan stiffened. "Who is he?" The officer glanced at me, then back at Ryan. He's been following young women for weeks, he said, but this is the first time he got his hands on one. That night changed everything. I quit the theater the next day. I still have nightmares about it, the way he stood there, waiting, that awful smile. And worst of all, I still don't know how long he had been watching me before I noticed, or how many nights before that he had been there, hidden in the dark, waiting. I never went to the movies in the afternoon. It felt unnatural, like stepping into a time that didn't belong to me. But that day, I had time off, and my 6-year-old son, Ethan, had been asking to see Galaxy Pals 2 for weeks. The theater parking lot was half empty when we arrived. Most people were at work or school. Inside, the lobby felt hollow, the usual nighttime rush replaced by a few scattered families and retirees. The smell of buttered popcorn and the hum of soda machines filled the air. Ethan bounced on his toes as we got our tickets. The teenage cashier barely looked at us, his focus locked on his phone. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. We found our seats easily, center row, 5 seats from the aisle. Ethan dug into his kid's snack pack while the previews rolled. I leaned back, relaxing in the plush seat. For the next 90 minutes, everything was normal. Just me and my son, laughing at animated characters on a massive screen. No stress, no worries. Then we left the theater, and she found us. We walked into the dimly lit hallway leading to the exit. The carpet smelled faintly of spilled soda and old popcorn. The theater was nearly empty, just a few other parents ushering their kids out. That's when I noticed her. A woman stood near the exit, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She looked to be in her 50s, her clothes slightly wrinkled, her brown hair tangled in odd clumps. There was something off about her stance, something jittery. As we neared the doors, she turned toward us with wide, eager eyes. Hey there, she said too loudly. I instinctively pulled Ethan closer. Hi. She stepped forward, too close. Her breath smelled sour like old coffee and something metallic. Listen, I need a ride, she said, voice wobbling. Just to my boyfriend's place. It's not far. I don't have any money, but... Sorry, I can't help, I said quickly. My gut screamed at me to walk away. She didn't back off. Please, it's real close. I just need to get there, I'm sorry, I repeated, firmer this time. Ethan fidgeted beside me. Daddy, let's go. I nodded. Yeah, bud, let's get to the car. We pushed past her and walked into the parking lot. I could feel her behind us, the weight of her presence sticking to my back. I glanced over my shoulder. She was following us. The air was warm but carried a slight breeze. Our car sat near the middle of the parking lot, surrounded by only a few other vehicles. I quickened my pace, gripping Ethan's small hand. Footsteps shuffled behind us. Wait, please, I really need help, she called. I didn't respond. I unlocked the car, yanked the door open, and ushered Ethan inside. The woman kept walking toward us, her hands twitching at her sides. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, as I backed out, something shifted in my stomach. The woman was walking toward a car. Her car. She had a vehicle the entire time. She wasn't stranded. She never needed a ride. I watched in the rearview mirror as she climbed into a dark, gray sedan. My mouth went dry. Then she pulled out and started following us. I kept my face neutral for Ethan's sake. Daddy, that lady was weird, he said from the back seat. Yeah, buddy, I said, trying to keep my voice light. But don't worry, we're going home. I checked the mirror again. The gray sedan stayed a few car lengths behind me. I took a right. She took a right. I turned left at the next light. She turned left. My hands tightened on the wheel. My heart beat too fast. Was she actually following me home? I tried to stay calm. Maybe she really did have a friend in my neighborhood. Maybe I was being paranoid. Then at a four-way stop, a car pulled out between us, blocking her. I exhaled slowly. By the time I reached our street, the gray sedan was gone. I felt stupid for worrying, until she found us again. Ethan ran inside, already talking about his favorite part of the movie. My wife Lauren greeted us with a smile. "How was it?" "Good," I said, trying to shake off the weirdness. Popcorn everywhere, but he loved it. I didn't mention the woman, didn't see the point in worrying Lauren. An hour passed, then 2. I started to forget about it. Until the gray sedan pulled up in front of our house, my stomach dropped. Lauren noticed my face. "Who's that?" I swallowed. "I don't know." I knew. The woman sat in her car, staring at our house. I felt something shift in my chest, anger replacing fear. I wasn't letting her sit out there all night. I walked outside. The moment I stepped onto the porch, she rolled down her window. "Hey," she said, her voice oddly soft. "I'm real sorry, my friend lives over here." She gestured vaguely down the street. I took a step closer, keeping my voice steady. "Why did you follow me home?" She blinked too fast. "I didn't." I clenched my jaw. "You did." She gave a half smile. "You got a real nice house." Something about the way she said it sent a chill up my spine. Then she got out of her car. I took a step back, instinct screaming at me. She walked past me, down the sidewalk, disappearing around the corner. But her car stayed. For hours. By nightfall, I almost convinced myself she was gone for good. Then the pounding started. Loud, desperate fists slamming against the front door. Ethan screamed from the bedroom. Lauren grabbed my arm. "Call the police." I already was. Through the peephole, I saw her wild eyes, her face twisted in some unreadable emotion. "Let me in!" she shrieked. My hands shook as I relayed everything to the dispatcher. The pounding didn't stop. Then suddenly, sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. She spun around, hands up, as the cops stormed forward. They pinned her against the car. I exhaled for the first time in hours. The police took her away. They told me she had a record, mostly minor offenses, but with a history of unstable behavior. I never saw her again. But for weeks, I flinched at knocks on the door. For months, I double-checked the locks every night. And for years, I wondered, what would have happened if I had let her in? Friday nights were always busy at Brookfield Cinemas. It was one of the nicer theaters in town. Clean, modern, with the kind of plush recliner seats that made watching a movie feel like an event. For most people, it was a place to relax, to forget about their week for a couple of hours. For me and my girlfriend Anna, it was our favorite date night spot. That night, we had planned everything in advance. A late-night showing of Shadow Valley, a slow-burn psychological thriller that had been getting rave reviews. It wasn't a blockbuster, so we figured the crowd wouldn't be too bad. We arrived a little after 9:30. The theater lobby was alive with energy. Teenagers lingering by the arcade, couples holding hands as they waited in line for popcorn, and the smell of buttery snacks thick in the air. The soft hum of soda machines and the low chatter of patrons made it feel warm and familiar. Anna nudged me as we walked toward the ticket counter. "Extra butter?" I smiled. "Obviously." We grabbed a large popcorn, 2 sodas, and made our way toward Theater 7. The pre-show commercials were already playing when we entered. It was about half full, clusters of people scattered through the middle rows with a few loners toward the back. We picked seats in the second-to-last row, the perfect spot, not too close to the screen, but not directly by the aisle either. As I settled in, I felt someone slip into the row behind us. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another late arrival. But when I glanced back, I noticed a guy sitting directly behind me. He looked to be in his early 20s, maybe a couple of years younger than me. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up over his head, casting a shadow over his face. His posture was relaxed, almost too casual, like he didn't quite belong there. I shook it off. The lights dimmed, and the movie began. For a while, everything was normal. First signs about 15 minutes in, something small hit Anna's shoulder. She flinched slightly but didn't react beyond brushing at her sweater. I barely noticed. Then another piece of popcorn landed on her lap. I frowned. Turning slightly, I glanced behind us. The guy in the hoodie was staring straight at the screen, motionless. If he had thrown anything, he wasn't showing it. Maybe an accident? I turned back around. Then another piece hit her hair. That was no accident. This time I twisted in my seat fully, making eye contact with him. He didn't look away, didn't speak, just smirked. I clenched my jaw and kept my voice low. Knock it off. He didn't react, didn't apologize, just stared for another second, then turned his gaze back to the screen. I exhaled slowly and faced forward again. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. The guy stayed quiet. No more popcorn, no more weirdness. I started to relax. Then Anna leaned over and whispered, "I need to use the restroom." She stood up, carefully making her way past the other seats. As she passed, the guy let out a low, sharp whistle. My stomach twisted. I turned immediately, eyes narrowing. "What the hell is your problem?" He grinned. Didn't answer. Just made a slow, exaggerated talking motion with his hand, fingers opening and closing like a puppet. Mocking me. That was it. I leaned closer, my voice barely above a whisper. "You want to take this outside?" For a second, his grin faltered. Then, as if deciding it wasn't worth it, he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, man. Just watching the movie." I glared at him for another beat before turning back around. Anna returned a few minutes later, and I told her what happened. She frowned. "Let's just ignore him. We'll be out of here soon." I nodded, but something in my gut told me this wasn't over. The movie ended a little after midnight. People slowly filtered out, stretching and chatting as they made their way into the lobby. Anna and I lingered for a bit, waiting for the crowd to thin out before heading to the parking lot. Outside, the air was cool, and the once-packed lot had mostly cleared. Our car was parked near the back, under one of the dim streetlights. As we walked, I felt eyes on us. Then I saw him, the guy from the theater. He was leaning against a car with 3 other guys, all roughly the same age. They were talking and laughing, but the moment they saw us, their conversation slowed. Then the guy smirked and called out, "Hey, tough guy." I ignored him. He called out again, this time adding a slur. I felt my fists clench, but I kept walking. Then, just as we reached the car, I heard footsteps behind us. Fast. I turned just in time to see him closing the distance. I barely had time to react before he stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "Relax," he said, smiling. "Just wanted to chat." I didn't buy it. Anna grabbed my arm. "Let's go." I unlocked the car, keeping my eyes on them as we got in. But as soon as I started the engine, the guys got into their own car, and they followed us. At first, I hoped it was a coincidence, but as we pulled onto the street, their car stayed right on our tail. Too close, too intentional. Then they started swerving slightly, jerking their car forward as if trying to intimidate us. Anna's grip tightened on the seat. "What do we do?" My mind raced. "I think we should go back to the theater," I said. She nodded quickly. I took a sharp turn. They followed. No more doubt. They weren't just messing around. They were chasing us. I pushed the speed limit, my heart hammering. But no matter how fast I went, they stayed right behind us. Then, up ahead, I spotted a gas station. It was well lit, a few cars parked near the pumps. "Hold on," I muttered. I swerved into the lot and parked right by the entrance. For a second, I thought it worked. Their car slowed down. Then they pulled into a space nearby. Anna exhaled shakily. "They're waiting." We sat there for what felt like forever. Then, one of them got out. Not the guy from the theater. One of his friends. He walked slowly toward our car, hands in his pockets, like he had all the time in the world. I knew then, if we stayed, this wouldn't end well. I made a snap decision. As soon as he got close, I slammed the car into reverse. Then I floored it. The guy jumped back, startled. Their car revved up, but I was already peeling out onto the main road. I didn't stop until we reached the police station. We reported everything. The harassment, the chase. The officers took it seriously. They found the guy's car on security cameras, tracked them down. Turned out the guy from the theater and one of his friends had been banned weeks ago. Suspicious behavior, harassing customers. But this was different. This was targeted. They were given a warning. No arrest, just a warning. That was months ago. We still go to that theater. But every time I park in that lot, I can't help but look around, half expecting to see him again. So far I haven't, and I hope I never do. The movie theater wasn't anything special, just a small, slightly outdated spot in a strip mall, the kind of place families went on weekends and teenagers hung out when they had nothing better to do. I had been working there for about 6 months, mostly doing concessions, sometimes taking tickets when they were short-staffed. It wasn't the worst job in the world, but I hated closing shifts. Something about an empty theater after hours was unnerving. The flickering lights, the hum of the projectors shutting down one by one, the way the hallways felt too long and too quiet. That night it was just me and Leo, the guy who worked the box office. He was a few years older than me, maybe 21, and always had this easygoing attitude that made him a little too comfortable with slacking off. He spent most of his shifts scrolling on his phone, but at least he wasn't a creep. I was 17 and still living with my parents, which meant walking to and from work wasn't a big deal. My house was only a few blocks away, and in the summer heat, the walk home was actually kind of nice. But this wasn't summer. It was late November, and the cold had settled in, making the air sharp and the streets quiet. At around 11:30, the last movie started, a low-budget horror flick that had only drawn a handful of people. Once it was playing, the place was mostly dead. Leo locked the front doors like usual. "I'm gonna finish up in the office," he said. "You good out here?" I nodded, already wiping down the counters at the concession stand. "Yeah, just gotta close out the register and clean up." "Cool. If you need me, holler." He disappeared into the back hallway that led to the manager's office, leaving me alone in the dimly lit lobby. I didn't mind. I was used to it. Until the door opened. I heard it before I saw it. The unmistakable creak of the front door swinging open. My stomach tightened. Leo had locked it. I looked up, and there he was. A man in a long, dark coat. He stepped inside like he belonged there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, a beanie pulled low over his face. Something about him felt wrong. Maybe it was the way he moved, fast but deliberate, like he had a destination in mind. Or maybe it was the way he ignored me completely, not even glancing toward the counter as he strode past. He didn't stop at the box office, didn't check the show times, didn't hesitate. He just walked straight into the hallway where the theaters were. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. "Sir?" I called after him. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. No response. I leaned over the counter, watching as he disappeared into the dimly lit corridor. A second later, he was gone. I exhaled, trying to rationalize it. Maybe he had a ticket already. Maybe he had stepped outside for a smoke and Leo forgot to relock the door. Still, something about it gnawed at me. I grabbed my phone and texted Leo. Me. "Hey, did you unlock the door? Some guy just walked in." A few seconds passed. Leo. "What? Number who?" Me. "IDK. Some guy in a coat just walked past me. Didn't say anything. Went into the hallway." There was a longer pause. Then, "Leo. Stay put. I'll check it out." I swallowed hard, glancing toward the hallway again. It was too quiet. The air felt heavier, like the theater itself was holding its breath. I gripped the edge of the counter, waiting. Leo came out a minute later, frowning. "There's no one back there," he said. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I checked the halls. No one's in there." "That's not possible." I felt my pulse quicken. I saw him go in. He didn't come back out. Leo rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the security camera monitor in the office. "Let me check the footage." I followed him. The tiny office smelled like old coffee and stale popcorn. Leo pulled up the camera feed, rewinding to the last 5 minutes. We watched in silence as the grainy footage showed the man walking in. He moved fast, his coat swaying around his legs. He passed by me, just like I remembered. And then, in the next frame, he was gone. Leo frowned. "What the hell?" We rewound it again, watched him enter, watched him disappear, not into a theater, not out the front door. Just gone. A chill ran down my spine. Leo exhaled sharply. Maybe we just missed him leaving. Through a locked door? My voice was tight. He had no answer for that. Outside, the wind howled against the glass doors. And then, from somewhere deep in the theater, a thud. I jumped. "Did you hear that?" Leo nodded slowly. "Yeah." It came again. Louder this time. A dull, heavy thud that echoed through the empty building. I grabbed Leo's arm. "We need to call the cops." Before he could answer, the sound changed. No longer a thud. Now it was footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming toward us. Leo grabbed a flashlight from the office and stepped into the hallway. I followed, my stomach twisting. The air felt colder. The hallway stretched out in front of us, dark and silent. And then I saw him. The man. Standing at the far end of the corridor, completely still. His face was hidden in shadow, but I knew he was looking at us. I whispered, "Leo." He raised a hand and waved. It was a slow, mechanical wave, almost mocking. My breath caught in my throat. Leo took a cautious step forward. "Hey man, theater's closed. You can't be here." The man didn't move. Then without a sound, he turned and walked straight into Theater 5. Leo hesitated, then sighed. "I'll get him out." I grabbed his sleeve. "Leo, don't..." But he was already moving. I had no choice but to follow. Inside Theater 5, the screen was blank. The seats were empty. The dim aisle lights cast eerie shadows along the carpet. The man was gone. Leo swore under his breath. "Where the hell..." And then, directly behind us, a whisper, so close I felt the breath on my neck. "Enjoy the show." I spun around, my heart in my throat. The theater was empty, but the air was wrong, thick, pressing in around us. The exit door at the back of the theater, unlocked. Open just a crack. Leo grabbed my wrist. "We're leaving. Now." We bolted, raced through the halls, threw open the front doors and stumbled into the cold night air. We didn't stop running until we were halfway across the parking lot. The theater loomed behind us, dark and silent, and then a figure appeared at the glass doors. The man, standing there, watching us. He didn't try to follow. He just lifted his hand and waved. We never figured out how he got in. The security footage? It was corrupted after that night, just static. Leo quit a week later. I followed. I still pass by that theater sometimes. It shut down last year, boarded up, abandoned. But sometimes when I drive past at night, I swear I see a figure standing behind the glass doors, just standing there, watching and waving.